Right. Okay, I shall mute myself, and Helen and Becky, you have the...
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Lovely to be here today, everybody. I'm Helen Squibb, and I'm the head of Hampshire and Isle of Wight Educational Psychology. And my colleague Becky's here today, who's going to introduce herself.
Hello, hello everybody. Yeah, I'm Becky Murphy. I'm an area senior educational psychologist for the south of the service, which covers Havant, Ferrum, and the Isle of Wight.
Thanks, Becky. Okay, so what we're going to do today is just talk to you a little bit about the roles of educational psychologists and also how we work in Hampshire and Isle of Wight educational psychology. It's a big topic. We're very happy to come back at a later date if there are other things that you want us to go into in more detail. But today we just thought we'd give you an overview and a sort of feel of what we do and how we work and how we support outcomes for children, young people and families. Okay, so here we go. I have to say, honestly, people often do not understand what psychologists do and definitely what educational psychologists do. And it's sometimes thought of as quite a mysterious profession. Please be reassured it's not at all mysterious. And hopefully by the end of today, you'll see what we do. I appreciate that some of you may already have worked with educational psychologists and hopefully have had good experience with them, but hopefully this gives you that broader picture of us and our work. Okay, we're just going to flick through. There are lots of portrayals of psychologists out there in the sort of in our culture, really, just about, you know, the fact that we can read minds and all of those sorts of things, and that we do therapy and people lie on couches and that we show people ink blots and that we do lots and lots of testing. So all of those sorts of images of psychologists that you may have seen, I don't think we're like any of those, to be quite honest. And we're going to tell you today just how I hope different our work is really, and how relevant it is to vulnerable children. So we want to today give you a chance to understand the role of the educational psychologist in Hampshire, a little bit about the types of work we do, which Becky is going to take us through. And we thought it'd be helpful particularly just to focus on our role around statutory SEN work as well, because I know that that's particularly relevant, but also to give you that broader view. And we've got obviously time for questions and answers. So just a little bit about our service, really. We are a very big educational psychology service covering both Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. We're split into 4 area teams, each of them led by an area senior EP. And obviously Becky is one of our area seniors. And those area seniors really work with all the schools in their area. They link with the parents and families in their area. They coordinate a team of educational psychologists and our lovely support staff who support the work of those psychologists. And they also are the key link with the other services across education, health and social care working in that area. So those people there are really the key people who coordinate our work out in the localities and just make sure everything happens and are there for a contact if you need any information beyond your link EP. Altogether, we've got nearly 80 psychologists in the service, so they each manage quite a big team of psychologists, and each team does the full range of educational psychology work, really, that we're going to talk about in a moment. Okay, so here's our best attempt at a summary, which we hope is helpful, of what we do. So, as applied psychologists, our job is to bring an understanding of psychological theory, practice and skills in order to support children, young people, families, schools, and other settings, really. We do work across education and social care settings and across some health settings as well. But our focus really is on education as our particular strand of expertise. There's obviously lots of different types of psychologists, and we're just one branch of applied psychology. And we all those branches share a common training route. That basically you start off being trained as a psychologist, and then you go on to do some very specialist training in your field of psychology. And obviously ours is education. You may come across clinical psychologists, occupational psychologists, forensic psychologists. There are lots and lots of branches of psychology. Educational psychology is quite a big branch of applied psychology, but I don't think it's the biggest. A particular focus of our work is supporting emotional and social well-being, but we also focus on learning needs, anything where it's around that educational perspective. We do focus on educational outcomes. That's what we want to promote, but in a very holistic way, really. We don't just think of children and young people in terms of their exam scores or their educational attainment. Those things are important in our working with children and young people in schools, but they're not the only thing. We take a very holistic view of that child's experience, their motivations, their skills outside of school, what matters to them, their friendships, their relationships with key adults in school, their dreams, their aspirations, all of those things. So we try and get that really very good rounded view of children and young people in order to support them and to get to know them and their families. We come from a range of backgrounds before we did our educational psychology training. All educational psychologists will have done some work in an applied setting before they do their training. That might be a children's home, it might be a voluntary service, but something with children and families that gives them that sort of understanding of the workplace. Quite a lot of us have been teachers before, some have been teaching assistants. All of those things add to that wide range of experience. And just a final point, sorry, Becky. We're all registered with the Health and Care Professional Council in order to practice. So that's our sort of governing body, which sets our standards. And we take those very, very seriously, and we really do make sure that we really are committed to the highest professional and ethical standards in everything that we do. Okay, some key principles. These are the key principles that guide our work right across everything we do. So we are definitely person-centered. We're also really focused on strengths. So it's not just about finding what's going wrong or what a child or young person can't do. It's about what they're good at as well, because often those are the things that really give us the things that we can work on and develop, as well as helping them with the things they find difficult. We work with systems such as schools and families to help overcome barriers to children's young people's learning and well-being. So it's not about that sort of fixing the child or young person model. It's about saying what's going on for this child and young person. How can we best support them in able to help them flourish, really? And that is often about helping teachers or staff in settings think about things differently, do things differently, giving them some suggestions, helping them to hear the child's voice and the family's voice. So really helping to sort of overcome any barriers that are there. We promote preventative work. We really want to be involved as early as possible. I know there are some challenges around that, and we're quite a scarce resource, but we do quite a lot of systems work with schools to try and set up systems, or help schools set up systems and colleges and everybody, so that problems don't emerge for children and young people. And we really focus on things that promote inclusion. Empowerment is a really, really important part of our work. We don't want to do things to people or tell people what they should be doing. It's about helping them think of their way forward and empowering them to be heard. A lot of our work is about helping young people have a place to express how they're feeling and what they need to happen and what they want to happen and where they want things to move to. So we hope that in our work with families, with professionals and with children and young people, we're leaving them more empowered and feeling more able to move forward, really, following our involvement. Okay, Becky.
Yeah, I added the evidence-based one.
Oh, yes, sorry, I didn't spot that one. The other thing is that everything we do is based upon psychological theory, practice and research. So if we are saying to a school or a family, this might be something that you want to try, that we recommend may work in this situation, that's come from a very sound research base that shows that it's a good thing to be trying. Not everything works in every situation, but it's our training gives us that, and we are required to check all the time that what we're doing is evidence and research based. And lastly, I think we do try and take an objective perspective. We're an independent person working with the school, the family and the young person and organisations. We're not there to promote one person's view over another person's, or, you know, everybody's got some different views on these things. We are there to provide quite an independent, objective perspective on a situation and, you know, to help move things forward, really. That's our main aim. Okay, so that's the sort of high level, you know, all those principles and how we work. We're going to move on to a little bit about what we actually do, and I'm going to hand over to Becky in a moment to talk about the work that the teams do. So we've got two strands of our work, really, two quite large strands. The first one is our statutory SEN work around education, health and care plans and assessments, and other work that we do for the local authority. So that's quite an important, well, very important part of our work, actually, and it's quite a large part of our work. And alongside that, there's another sort of cluster of types of work we do, which is all of our early intervention and preventative work and systemic work. Clearly, most of that is with schools, preschools, colleges. We do some work with independent schools, any educational setting. We also work with other services that support education, such as the specialist teachers, the school improvement service. And we bring a psychological perspective to some of that work. And then we also work with other organisations and services. So we work very closely with social care across a range of areas. We work closely with colleagues in health, particularly in child and adolescent mental health services. And we work with the wider council services as well, to bring that sort of psychological perspective to some of the work around supporting children and young people and improving their outcomes. So that's the sort of big overall principles. I'm going to hand over to Becky, who's going to just talk a little bit more really about what that means in practice and what that work looks like for her team and for the other teams. So over to you, Becky.
Thank you, Helen. Yeah, so the delivery of educational psychology is just huge. The breadth of it is really quite massive in what we're doing on a daily basis. So we've tried to kind of simplify it into those areas of the core delivery for the local authority and the work that we do for schools. And I'll explain all of those in a bit more detail. So the types of work we might do for the local authority, as Helen said, one of the very important parts of our work is about the statutory education, health and care plan need assessments. And the code of practice actually states that an educational psychology advice is required from the local authority educational psychologist. So this is a really important part of our work. And we do work now from age 0 to age 25. So we do cover a huge age range as well, going right up from little ones right up to adults and young adults. Also, I'll explain a little bit more about the statutory in a moment. So also for the local authority, we respond to critical incidents and sad events. And this is another really important and kind of priority part of our work, really. So what will happen is the local authority will contact us if they've heard of anything within a school, such as a sad event, such as a bereavement of a staff member, or schools may contact us if there's been a bereavement of a parent or a child where they just need that support, that immediate support. What we'll do is that will be a priority piece of work, and we'll arrange for an educational psychologist or two to go into the school, to contact the school and to kind of support through that initial process, really. Sometimes we'll do some supervision sessions with the staff members, or we'll just offer support and resources, or just a contact, really. We also get involved with statutory reassessments and tribunals. This is kind of work once children already have an education, health and care plan. There may be something that comes up either at a tribunal, or that is another question that needs asking. Perhaps there's been a significant change of need, or a change of provisions required. And then the local authority may ask us to get involved and to have a look at doing another statutory reassessment, which we'd then get involved with. A further activity that's becoming increasingly so really for our service is to offer supervision and support for other services. So we're trained at offering that clinical supervision at that level, and we have been involved with providing that support for other services and supervising all different types of kind of roles and responsibilities that people may hold within the local authority. And final thing that people will hopefully know about but will be interested in is that we do offer a telephone support line that has complete open access to parents and to schools and to professionals. This is open on a Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday from 9:30 to 11. There is a flyer that we're going to come on to in a moment, where I hope the link is going to work. That'll explain a little bit more about the telephone support line. But we can also send you the flyer, Sarah, so you can perhaps send it round to people.
That'd be brilliant, thank you.
So the statutory education, health and care plan advices, what these look like. So what will happen is that we'll get a request from the local authority for a statutory advice. They'll make the decision to go ahead with the education, health and care plan and contact us to ask if we can arrange to do that advice, that psychological advice. I will then allocate, as the area senior, will allocate those cases out to the educational psychologist. We try very hard to allocate them out to those educational psychologists who are linked to the specific schools where the child or young person is at, but that might not necessarily be so. The structure of the educational psychology advice is in two parts, and those of you that are familiar with the hub will know they're part of the hub kind of process. The first part of the advice, part A, includes a psychological perspective, and this is kind of our unique contribution really of our psychological thinking of all the aspects brought together and how that fits with our knowledge of psychology, psychological models, psychological approaches, and how all the kind of needs interlink and the impact that will have on education and progress within school. We've also got in that section the parent views and the child and young person's views, which are absolutely essential. And we'll obviously, the parent and you as parents know your children better than anybody, and that's really important for us that we have that information and are able to incorporate your views and your kind of points really into our reports, and really your thoughts and views will be reflected throughout the whole report. And also the child and young person's views, if they're able to express them however possible, is also really important to us and to be reflected within those advices. Then there is a section B, a part B of the advice, which is centred more on what the needs are and also the strengths and also the outcomes that we may want for the child moving forward. So these will be about the priority needs really and the priority outcomes that we see as really important for the child and essential. And then we'll also think of what provision we would recommend psychologically as being appropriate to meet those needs, and that will also be in that section. very much focus on that person-centred approach. So for us, it's very important that that advice really does reflect what the child wants, the child feels is important, but also the values and what's important to the parents as well. I think it might be a bit later, but if I explain now what part of that assessment process is, that sometimes we do a person-centred planning meeting, which some of you might have been part of before. And what that will involve is really listening, having the child or the young person at the absolute heart of that assessment and at the heart of the meeting. And everything is for the child, and kind of thinking about the child's future, the child's dreams, the child's values, and really what's really important to that child moving forward, what they think they need them to help them within education, obviously with parents' views as well being incorporated in that. That person-centred approach is absolutely core to the code of practice, for those of you that are familiar with that, and we really uphold that as a service. It's very important to us that that comes through. Our advice is bring together existing evidence with the current situation, and then we apply psychology to that, and we think about what that means psychologically. That might involve some direct assessment with the child. It more than likely will involve gaining the views of the child, but it may not be that any direct kind of cognitive assessments needed with the child. We may already have that information. So what we'll do is read through all the information that we already have. Sometimes needs are really well known and well established, but what we'll then do is read through all that information and establish the psychology around that, so we can incorporate that into our advice. So writing an education healthcare advice does not necessarily mean that we're going to do some direct one-to-one work with the child. There's all the other information that we're going to be using as well to be able to write that advice for that individual kind of child or young person. Okay, so this is a telephone support line. I'm hoping this might work. It might work, but then I might not be able to get back to my other bit.
I'm not sure if it will, Becky, but if you're able to copy in a minute, don't do it now, copy and paste it off your document and stick it in chat. I can share it with everybody.
Okay, I'll do that. I mean, but what the telephone support line basically is, so you will speak to a psychologist, so you'll speak to a trained psychologist on the phone. At those times, are Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday, 9:30 to 11, it's available. Some details will be taken and the psychologist will contact you back usually. It's, as I say, it's open to anyone, it's open access, it's a confidential kind of line. It's just really for problem solving, for a kind of emotional offload. It just gives you an kind of access to a psychologist, really, is how it's working. We've extended the telephone support line due to COVID and the lockdown situation, and it's incredibly well used, and it's our evaluations show that it's very helpful and it's been very useful. So we'd obviously like that to continue to be used by anybody who really feels that they need it at the time.
Becky, can I jump in and ask a quick question there? Is that helpline open to anybody? So you don't need to be on SEN support, you don't need to have any HCP, it's anybody who's got a concern?
Absolutely open to anybody, yeah. Anybody got a concern, little niggle, little worry, just wants some signposting, some advice, some resources, anything. It's open for any kind of problem solving, and it's open to anybody, Sarah. Parents are the most frequent callers of the line, but also school professionals sometimes use it as well.
School hours, so.
Yeah. Okay. So, service delivery within schools. So, education settings are able to purchase a service level agreement with us. In Hampshire, I don't know if Helen knows the percentage of schools that have a service level agreement with us, but it's very high, I think, isn't it, Helen?
Yes, it's high. It's high 90s, I think, at the moment. So the vast majority of schools, yeah.
Thank you, Helen. So the vast majority of schools do have a service level agreement with us, and that means they will have a named educational psychologist who is a consistent part of their kind of school and the contact for the school. What happens is that the school will purchase a number of days from us, which equates to a number of educational psychology hours, and then the school will prioritise and decide what they would like to use that time for, along with our kind of advice and negotiation and agreement. So at the beginning of each kind of financial year, we'll have a discussion, a planning meeting with the school. This is the amount of time you've bought. What would you like to use that for? What's really important? What's the priorities for your school this year? Who are the children and young people who you would see as priorities for this year? So it's kind of a negotiation around that, but ultimately the school will kind of prioritise what they want to use the EP time for. That time is used for pre-statutory and preventative support work, which I'll go into a little bit more. It can be used for individuals, for groups, for the whole school support, and it also applies to early years settings, to schools and to post-16s like colleges as well. So a real breadth of kind of areas that do have a service level agreement with us, and I'll be going into a little bit more detail about what that involves. So, pre-statutory and preventative higher involvement, what could this look like? So traditionally people think of it as casework, I think, with an educational psychologist, and it can be casework, but it's increasingly becoming other things, I think, with schools, and schools are using us for all different types of activities. If it is casework, that can include consultations, it may include observations, we may do some direct assessment work with children and young people, and then that's all part of a plan, do and review cycle for those young people, and in line with what the SENCO has planned and their provision mapping of the school. What we do find is sometimes schools have a really good idea of a child's needs, and they just want advice and tweaking on the strategies and recommendations to have a look at what they're putting in place, if that's right and if it's going to work. Sometimes they're really stuck and they really don't know, they can't understand what the child's needs are, and they need a little bit more of unpicking and a little bit of support for us to untangle those needs and really establish what those needs are about for the child and young person. I mean, as Helen mentioned previously, it's all scientifically hypotheses. So we're working on the basis of our experience, our knowledge, the application of psychological theories, to try and work out what might be going on for this child, and importantly what we can put in place and what the school can put in place to help the child progress and move forward and be happier. It may also be that the school uses that SLA time for training. We do lots of training on different kind of areas. There's a huge list of training areas that we do depending on the school's requirements and needs. So we do some awareness raising, we do some skill development, and we also do some bespoke training. So some of the most recently kind of taken up trainings have been about supporting emotional well-being of children, supporting emotional well-being of staff, lots of anxiety training, we've done some bereavement training, we've done lots of trauma and attachment training recently. So really it's a broad range, and there's also obviously things like literacy needs training, there's math skills training, resilience, the list goes on and on. But really it's down to what the school's development plan is and what the school sees as a real priority for them.
Becky, can I jump in with a question there, just because it's relevant for where you are? And how do schools that don't have an SLA in place access those services?
From our service, they would need to have a service level agreement to access that training. I think there will be other services available within SEN and the local authority that may provide those kind of trainings at no cost or free availability. There are some charities as well that offer some trainings as well that schools will be aware of. So the local offer that's available from the local authority website page will outline the services that are available to support in different areas. As Helen said, at the moment, I think we are in the high 90%, something like 96, I think 97% of schools have an SLA with us. So we are only talking about the real minority of schools. And usually schools don't have an SLA with us because they've got another direct route to a psychologist. So they may have a private psychologist route, or they may be an academy that have a psychology kind of section, if you see what I mean, support that way. So it's rare that there would be a school that isn't getting that psychological support from somewhere, I think, Sarah. Very
Thank you.
Supervision and coaching is a big part of our work. So we are trained to coach. We run through coaching models, and we'll do individual coaching with head teachers. We do family support workers. We coach SENCOs. And we also do supervision with groups of staff, with kind of year groups at secondary schools, really anybody who's working within that school environment can receive supervision if the school see that as a priority need for them. At the moment, as you can imagine, there's quite a high demand for supervision and for the well-being of the staff, just following on from what's the year that we've had really, or nearly a year and a half now that we've had. And we also do some project work, so this is kind of more whole school work. So examples that I've done, I've had a school that wanted to just look at playground behaviour, so we did a whole project on playground behaviour. I've done projects before on boys' attainment in writing, for example, and differentiation in teaching. We've had how to kind of motivate learners, might be another project that the school want. So really it all goes back to what the school's priorities are and how we can support their development plan moving forward. Person-centred planning we've talked about. We do lots of person-centred plans, lots of transition planning. So we might look, the school might want us to do transition planning for particular children or particular year groups. And we also do group work and therapeutic intervention. So we offer therapeutic interventions based on social and emotional wellbeing interventions. We also do exam anxiety groups, so just some examples of what we do. It's kind of a huge breadth really of our work, depending on what the school really want to use that SLA time for, and that kind of, yeah, what they want to use the EP for really as priority. So it goes way beyond just those kind of individual casework kind of situations. So I guess what people ask us most of all actually is, what is an EP assessment and how does an EP assessment work? So an assessment to us is a really broad term, and what assessment involves are all of these questions here. So we look at what are the key concerns and questions. So we really try to break down to what is the psychological question that's been asked here about this child, young person, or about this group of children, or whatever the situation is. So what information do we need to be gathered? So what have we got already and what do we need in addition to that? Then we think about the best way of gathering that information. Once we've got that information, what is that information telling us about what's needed? And that bit is the bit that's really important. We need to know as psychologists, and the school need us to tell them or to kind of discuss with them what provisions and approaches they can put in place to help children and young people make progress. That's ultimately what we want to do. We want to support the school and empower the school to change the way they're perhaps teaching, perhaps to look at new approaches, to think in a different way, just so that they can support that child to move forward. How will that inform their action planning? So what will that do with their action plan? What will that mean for the child and young person? What will that mean for the teachers? What will that mean for the school? And then, I guess importantly, how are we going to review that? How are we going to know that we've made a difference for that child, young person, or for the school? So this cartoon shows you for a first selection, everyone has to take the same exam, climb that tree, just to illustrate really that assessment is going to be different for different people. So for each child and young person, there's no kind of standard, this is what we do. Everything is individualised and very person-centred for that child or young person. So these are the types of EP assessment you might have heard of. These are some of the EP assessments that you might see in reports, etc. So the first one, I guess, is most commonly associated with educational psychologists, but ironically is probably the one we do the least of. That's the standardised assessments. So these you may know as IQ tests, are kind of more commonly known as IQ tests. And what they do is measure performance, and they produce a number. So they'll produce a percentile, which is how many children out of 100 would do better than your child the same age. They'll produce kind of an age equivalent. So your child has got a memory of age, whatever. It is all quantitative. What those assessments will do is they will give you that information about what the child is finding difficult. They'll only give you information about what the child is finding difficult on that day, in that situation, in that context. What it won't do is really tell you what needs to happen and what needs to be put in place to help the child to make progress, which is what the next one will do, the dynamic assessment. So the standardised assessment certainly has a place, it certainly has a value, But for us, it kind of stops short a little bit of being able to tell us what to recommend to schools and how we can change the approaches for children to move them forward. So it definitely has its use, but we would say in some ways for our work, it's sometimes a bit limited, I would say. The other thing with standardised assessment, for those of you who are not aware of standardised assessments, is they work in that you usually keep going on the tasks until the child fails. It's when the child fails, they'll give you the standardised score of where they're at. So for self-esteem and for motivation, it's quite tricky for children and young people sometimes, because they need to fail for us to say, right, stop, that's where we're stopping. Whereas with dynamic assessment is very much more about the assessor, so the psychologist, adapting what they're doing, how they're presenting the challenge, so that it gives us information, one, about what the needs are for the child and what they're finding difficult, but more importantly is it will tell us what teachers need to do, what teaching support staff need to do to mediate learning and to help the child scaffold their learning to make progress. So with dynamic assessment, the child or young person will always end on a success. They'll always be successful, because even if they find the task really, really challenging, we'll be putting in enough scaffolding and enough support so that they achieve and so that they do make progress at the end of it, so that they do feel that they've done well and their self-esteem is kind of really high at the end of those tests. And it gives us such a massive wealth of information. It won't give us the numbers, but what it will do is tell us what the child needs to make progress and also what they're finding tricky. So from a dynamic assessment, the typical things we'll report is the strengths that the child is showing, because that will show us those real strengths in those kind of activities and tasks. It will also show us what the child has found difficult, developmental areas. And also the third thing is that it will tell us what we need to put in place to help the child move forward. We'll also do some observation, which is a type of assessment, which gives us a wealth of information. We'll also do some consultations. You'll see consultations that might be with school staff, it might be with families, and from consultation, we'll be asking kind of key questions that will help us to make those kind of hypotheses really about what's happening for the child and young person. And also, again, just putting on there again, the other type of assessment you might see are these person-centred planning meetings, which are happening more and more frequently, and really we love doing, because they have the child at the heart of kind of the meeting, and we can really think about the child. Often the child or young person is invited to that meeting or invited to contribute to that meeting, and that kind of keeps it alive and really positive. Okay. I think that's it. This is just a bit, that's it from us, apart from just to open it up for any questions.
Thank you, Becky and Helen. That was absolutely fascinating. I've learned loads. Really, really interesting. And you've covered off. I've kind of got some questions coming in, and I had some questions I'd previously prepared, and you've covered off almost everything that I've got. So that's absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much. So I've just got a couple really. One is that you mentioned setting up systems with schools or settings to support children and young people. Could you give us a practical on the ground example of what that might actually mean?
Can you hear me, Sarah?
Yeah, Paul, but can I ask you to mute, please?
Okay.
Becky, do you want to answer that? Because you've probably got a more live example than me.
I'm thinking.
Shall I ask another one while you think on that one?
Yeah.
What else have I got? This one may or may not be easier. My child is having an assessment next week, and due to COVID, I've been told it will be conducted remotely without my child in attendance. It's not really a question, but sort of how does that then work? It's more of a comment than a question, but. I know myself, we've had a remote one with my daughter. So how are assessments being conducted in these peculiar times?
Shall I start, Becky, and then you can add in? So, like with all our assessments, we'll try and make that assessment as bespoke as we can. We're taking a sort of a very sensible approach to assessment at the moment. We are doing some direct work where that is really, really required and necessary for a range of reasons. But actually, remote working, we've given it a lot of thought. We're using a lot of specially designed tools and techniques to make sure that that's a success for the child, the family, the professionals we're talking to. So we'd want to make every assessment bespoke. We'd always want to have that conversation about how best to do that. We want to involve the child if we can, and if that's appropriate, and if that's felt to be a good thing. But really, how that assessment will always be a part of a conversation between us and the family. And if we feel from that initial meeting, actually we need a bit more information, or there would be another activity that's helpful to do that might involve the child, then we can definitely have that discussion and do that. So it's just like Becky was saying before, really, there's no one model. It's what's right for that family, that child, and the professionals working with them, really. So they vary a lot, but they are underpinned by some special approaches that work better remotely, best remotely, so that the quality of our work is sustained. But it's like all of our work, it's a conversation, really, between the people we're working with and us about, actually, is this working for you? Do you think we need to do something else? Shall we do another meeting? Becky, is there anything you want to add to that? Do you like to add?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that over the last few months, we've been working really hard on gathering a kind of bank of virtual kind of assessment resources. So we've got a huge range of kind of assessments, checklists, activities, online activities that can be done assessment-wise, either with a child. And I would suggest if this assessment doesn't involve the child, it will be based on consultation, probably with the parents and teacher in that example. And that will be like Helen said, because that information was felt to be gathered in that way, or there's information available in other ways. It's so difficult to say because it's more individual kind of situation, really. I think for the other question about the systems, I was thinking about things that I've done recently. A common one is a behaviour support system. So kind of the behaviour policy, looking at a reward system, a reward strategy. Nurture groups is another system that might have been put in place for schools. So they want to have something where they've got a nurture kind of room or a nurture availability. We've put in systems for sensory kind of diets and sensory kind of circuits for children as another system. It can kind of be anything within the school that they're needing really at that time. We do a lot about physical intervention training and kind of awareness of what that means, again alongside that behaviour support kind of system. Yeah.
Okay, another one here. I'm not sure if you answered this in the presentation. I apologise because I missed this detail, but do you complete formal cognitive assessments or dyslexia support?
Shall I answer that, Helen?
Yeah, because it follows on, I think, from what you were saying.
So we absolutely do look at cognitive assessment. Cognitive basically is thinking skills. So we do look at thinking skills in all different ways, and we do cognitive assessment. For dyslexia, our kind of approach about dyslexia is a continuum of reading difficulties, which is very dependent on the support and provision that's put into place in the school as well. So there's so many definitions of dyslexia, but one common definition is that it's, and the British Psychological Society's definition is that it's difficulties with reading or spelling that kind of are persistent despite appropriate intervention over time. So one of the first key things we would do with dyslexia, with anybody who's querying dyslexia, is look what intervention has been put in place for that child and what provision has been put in place. Is it appropriate? Is it over time? Is it targeted at the right skills? Because saying a child's got difficulty with reading is a massive statement. There are so many tiny little skills involved in reading. And what we would do as psychologists is look really carefully at which skill is it that child needs to build. Which skill is it? Is this about self-esteem? Is this about an attitude to learning, an attitude to reading as well that needs nurturing alongside that difficulty with reading? So it's really for us as educational psychologists, really individual to the child or young person, and it's really under school and the support that's already in place. So it would be really pulling all of that apart And while we don't talk about diagnoses as educational psychologists, because we don't follow a medical model as such, even though some of us have got a doctor title. It's more about the individual child, what they need and what the school can put in place to help them make progress. If that makes sense.
Super, thank you. I've got two questions sort of about the same thing, which is when you would expect an EP to be involved in education in terms of an EHCP, and would you expect an EP to be involved before an EHCP is applied for, and then once there is an EHCP in place, would you expect an EP to be involved more than as a one-off, as kind of to follow up, I suppose?
I can take that, Becky. So yes, we would always encourage schools to involve us at the earliest opportunity, really. Not too early, because we don't want to sort of, you don't necessarily need a psychologist too early when issues and challenges are coming up. But we'd encourage schools, if they're getting stuck in their problem solving, they're thinking, actually, we're finding it hard to know how to support this child. We'd always really encourage them to have a conversation with us through their SLA at the earliest opportunity. So just so we can get to know that child, really. And we know that things work best when the school involves us over time. It involves us with reviews. We're really collaboratively working with the school and the family and the young person. So it doesn't always happen, and schools don't always decide to involve us, but we always encourage them to do that through the code of practice processes, really. We remind them about what the code says about involving outside specialist agencies. And then, obviously, as Becky said, we're involved in the assessment process, the statutory assessment process. Whether we get involved afterwards is there's two routes to our involvement. It's either via the setting that the child or young person is in with their plan. So if the school thinks, actually, I'm a bit stuck, I'd like to use some psychologist time to think about this annual review or to think about this particular area, they can request our involvement. And the other thing that sometimes happens is the SEN team, if there's a particular issue that they're working around with the family and the setting, will request our involvement as well. And that can happen at any stage when a child's got a plan. So they can ask us to become involved, and we will then pick up that piece of work and
just a thought, Helen, thinking about some of the parents in my get together. If your child isn't in a setting, and that may be because they're being home educated or they're in an ETAS sitting, and a parent would like a educational psychologist involvement, can they talk to the helpline, and would that, where you felt necessary, would that drive some educational psychology involvement?
Yeah, it's a really good question. We don't accept requests for involvement directly from parents. It's through the people working with them. But for children who are home educated, we can, sometimes we get requests for involvement from our colleagues in the inclusion support service who work with those families. So there is a route to us to make sure that those children and young people have access to the service. But we don't have direct requests from parents.
It just occurs to me that I know parents who have themselves applied for their EHCP, which is a legitimate route. They don't have to have school involved in applying in an EHCP, but it occurs to me, therefore, that if they are applying off their own back to the EHCP, that they potentially therefore miss that involvement of the EP service.
Yes, it's the school's responsibility. Obviously, the school leads that school support stage of the code. So in this sense, they're the sort of coordinators. And I think in that sense, going back to Becky's comments about the telephone support line, I think that's why that support line is important as well, because that we want to make sure that parents have direct access to us.
I think that's a brilliant service, and I'm sure lots of people weren't aware of it. And I think, it's great that it's there. Right, I think I've come to the end of most of my questions. I'm very conscious, everyone, that we've we've allowed Helen and Becky a huge amount of our time today. We're not done. Catherine had to leave unexpectedly to deal with an urgent matter, so I've effectively allowed you Catherine's time because I think that was superb. I think that was really, really interesting. I'm thrilled we've got it recorded because I think that will, you know, be of interest to a huge number of people. So thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. If anyone does have a question for the guys that they haven't popped up yet, please do, because we're not going to disappear just yet. But let's see how we're going. Sarah, do you think you've got sufficient time to cover your little bit for us?
Can I ask you a question, please?
Paul, yes, if it's short and on
It's
topic
short.
and not personal.
Sarah,
Sure.
Sarah, sorry.
Yeah, who's that?
I'm sorry, I need to go, so I've got another meeting.
Okay, that's absolutely fine, Becky.
But I'll send you the link for the
Brilliant, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Done, Paul. Quickly.
So my question is your organisation involved with primary behaviour services? Because when my son's school have difficulties and concerns, they engage with primary behaviour services, but not your department.
I can answer that really quickly. Yes, we
Excellent,
have
thanks, Helen.
good link, and we do provide supervision for them as well. So we have a good close working relationship with them.
Okay.
Thank you. That's useful. Thank you. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Sarah, are you there? I can't see anybody at the moment. It's really strange.
Yeah, I'm here. I'd written a grade and sorted out a 5-minute presentation for you, but it won't allow for any time for questions and answers.
Have you got a few minutes after, Sarah, if people have still got time themselves?
Yeah, I mean, that I do, yes.
Let's go for it and see how we go.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Let me know if it doesn't work. Our test earlier on.
Not having any joy.
It's not working this time, although our little test that we did earlier has now failed.
Love the system.
Let's try again.
Let me just double check that it's not anything that's happened my end. Try again now, see if that makes a difference. So, just while Sarah's having a play, do you want to explain? Oh, there we go. I was going to say explain what Sarah does for us, but there you go, all sorted. Brilliant, Sarah. If you could just pop it on slideshow, and then we're good to go.
You have slideshow?
Brilliant, thank you.
Okay. So, well, thanks for letting me come today. I just want to talk about occupational therapy and the fact that we are a strength-based profession, and that our main goals are to look at how we can enable your child to participate in everyday activities of their life and what's important to them and what matters to them. So here's the team. This is all the occupational therapists. We are based and dotted about the Hampshire area. We're mostly affiliated with the disabled children's teams. If you have got a social care, you will know that we are based within Eastleigh, Basingstoke, Havant and Eastleigh. So our main goals and role is to ensure that we are assessing what matters to the child and how they participate within family life. I'm not going to read everything that is here today, maybe you can share the slides later, but we will look at what is happening within the child's home. If there is a second home, we'll look and see if we can give you any assistance in meeting needs there, as well as foster placements, family link situations where they're maybe having a stay away from home. We will also look at equipment and assessments, but when it comes to, we will work with our health therapists who will see your child in school. So we are very much based within the home environment. So just pictures are far easier to show you what we can do. This is the end adaptation that was completed for this young chap here. As you can see, he likes to count dinosaurs and not sheep. This is the bedroom adaptation that was completed for him. So you can see he's got his hospital high-low bed. There's a ceiling track hoist showing. There's his specialist seating in the corner there. A little bit more dinosaurs with a low surface temperature radiator that's put in to make sure there's no scalding risks. And he has direct access out into his garden. Prior to that adaptation going ahead, he was mostly restricted to his first floor bedroom if he wasn't getting lifted and carried up and down the stairs. And he had very complex seating, so he was very happy with his adaptation once it was completed. Here's some other adaptations that we've done in the past. So removing the bath from a family bathroom and installing level access showering to ensure that a child can actually walk into the area and either be assisted or complete that themselves with a little push button and being able to have a wash. Again, from an access point of view, here's the other side of the personal care coin, where you've got a high-low bath that's in place. And as you can see, this child's being hoisted in and out of it. And what we can do with access nowadays, instead of you having a massive ramp to access your garden area or the front of your house, we can, with support of parents doing some groundwork, lift the area up so that you just have a level access from your house out into the patioed area. Here's the other flip side of the coin. This is a minor adaptation to promote independence with personal care. As you can see here, this is for wash hand basin, for teeth and face in the morning, and for bathing, you've got steps up for a bath board and a bath seat. So these are items that both health or social care can provide for you. So if you do have a health therapist, they can help you with this as well. You don't have to wait for social care. So what we can do regarding adaptations very much depends upon the tenure of your property, whether or not you own your own property or whether you're privately renting or if you're in social housing. And you have to be deciding to stay where you are for the next 5 years in order to access what's called the Disabled Facilities Grant. We have access to £30,000, and if the works are going to exceed that, then we have to look at how else we can actually help you. But the Housing and Regeneration Act has got 7 aspects to it. So it's safe access in and around the following areas, in and around the house, to have safe access to a room for sleeping, safe access to a room to complete personal care, safe access to a room for toileting, safe access to your principal family room, and safe access to your back garden. And I've noted down there some of the adaptations that can actually be completed within those criteria. So the referral process, if you feel that occupational therapy, social care can assist you, and if there's any environmental barriers that you have in your home, you can do a Google search, Occupational Therapy, Social Care, Hampshire. It will take you to the Family Information Service Hub to show you what the local offer is. And it'll give you a little bit of a briefing just to, I can include the link in the chat section. But if you're just requiring equipment or bits of assistance with hoisting, so anything that's not fitted to your property, your Solent Health therapist can help you, and that's their referral number there. They've got a very good website that breaks down exactly what it is that they can help your child with. If you're already known to social care, an internal referral can be made by your social worker. Alternatively, you can directly get in contact with our reception team for that single point of access to make a referral to us. And it would go back to, again, the fact that we're a strength-based profession, and we're very much interested in your child's occupation and their performance, what matters to them, and how we can help you safely support them at home. So I know that was very rushed, but
it didn't feel rushed. Thank you. I thought that was really good. I have 2 questions. You may have covered one, and I apologise if I missed it. What age range do you cover?
We cover 0 to 18, and then 18 plus comes under adult services.
Super. That was one. And can you just explain how, obviously you're OT, but you're not the same as the OTs we see in school, are you?
No, so we are specifically interested in your child's home environment and where their home is, whether that is with parents or foster placements. It's about where their home is and what functional difficulties that they are having and what environmental barriers there are. And that takes you back to the Disabled Facilities Grant. We're very much involved with altering the environment to remove the so you can have a normal family life.
Sorry, I'm just reading a question that's come in and trying to work out where it fits in. I think it's really interesting. Hang on, let me just go. Here we go. I think you partly covered this, but I'm just going to check. How do you manage? You've got parents in separate homes who share care. I think you did talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, we support families who are in split family situations. We have been able to do 2 grants in the past if the parents are in different authorities, or we have been able to split the grant between both homes, or the child has a main home, and that's where they are 80–90% of the time, and then we can provide advice as to how we can support in that second home, whether it's with equipment or whether it's yourself funding and adapting the property yourself. It's really very much on a needs-led basis, and we'll do whatever we can to try and ensure that the child is not discriminated at all, regardless of what the parent's situation is. It's about trying to meet the child's needs and making sure that they are able to perform to their best ability regardless of disability.
Super, thank you. So I'm just reading through the bits and pieces that are coming up. Okay, super, thank you. I appreciate so much, Sarah, that you stayed, because I appreciate we overran massively with that first presentation. But I thought, I think both the presentations today, I hope everybody agrees, have actually been really useful and have allowed us, certainly both of them have taught me loads, which is, I hope everybody else has learnt stuff too. Our session next month, let me just find you the date. I can't believe we will be in May already. So Meet the SEN next month is Friday, the 28th of May. It's another 1 PM one, just to catch all of us out. which is great. So we're back on the 28th of May. There's all sorts of different pieces coming up from HPCN in the current month. There is a session next week on annual reviews, if it's of interest to people, on Wednesday, and then the following week one on communication and interaction services. So all sorts of bits and pieces going